Ladies and gentlemen, today I invite you to embark on a journey of introspection, an exploration of the subtle yet profound experiences that shape our emotional landscape. We will delve into the quiet sting of being ignored, a universal sensation that, though often painful, carries within it a message, a signpost guiding us toward deeper understanding and growth. Together, we will uncover the transformative power hidden in moments of neglect and how these experiences, rather than breaking us, can lead to a richer, more empowered existence. I am Deborah Johnson. The first key point of this speech, acknowledge the pain, brings us face to face with the truth that many of us tend to avoid, the discomfort that arises when we feel ignored. In a world that often encourages resilience and toughness, we are sometimes told to brush aside our emotions and press forward. But there is power in acknowledging the pain we experience, especially when we are subjected to neglect or emotional abandonment. We are taught to suppress feelings of hurt or rejection to appear unaffected by the world around us. Yet what happens when we are truly honest with ourselves and allow ourselves to feel the weight of being ignored? Being ignored can be an insidious experience. It doesn't always arrive with an explosion of emotion. Sometimes it is a quiet, subtle thing. It can creep in when a loved one stops returning your calls, when a colleague fails to acknowledge your efforts, or when someone you respect chooses to turn their back when you need them most. It's not the grand gestures that hurt us. Rather, it's the absence, the lack of recognition, or the silence that speaks louder than words. It's the feeling that, for some reason, you have been dismissed, forgotten, or simply not worth the time of those around you. This pain, though often brushed aside, is real. It's the sting in your chest when you realize you've been left out, the knot in your stomach when you see others moving on without you, and we should not shy away from this pain. It may feel uncomfortable, even unbearable at times, but it is crucial to allow ourselves to sit with it, to experience it fully, before we can move past it. In a society that often emphasizes the need for positivity and strength, it can feel as if we must immediately find a way to fix the hurt or suppress it. But that is not how healing works. Healing comes from embracing the pain, not running from it. Acknowledge the discomfort for what it is, an emotional response that signals something within you is being affected. Perhaps it is a fear of abandonment, a feeling of inadequacy, or a deep need for approval that has been unmet. These emotions, though painful, are valid. We are all human, after all, and to experience hurt is part of the human condition. We cannot shield ourselves from every discomfort, nor should we. Instead, we must give ourselves permission to feel. When someone ignores us, the raw emotion we experience is an invitation to examine what lies beneath the surface. What is it that is causing such a reaction? What part of us feels diminished or unseen in the face of another's disregard? Acknowledging the pain of being ignored is not about wallowing in self-pity or giving power to the actions of others. It is not an invitation to dwell on the negative or to make assumptions about the intentions of those who have chosen to disregard us. Rather, it is a moment to honor our own emotional experiences, to recognize that our feelings are not trivial or unimportant. There is no shame in feeling hurt. It is a natural and valid reaction to feeling rejected. By allowing ourselves to acknowledge this pain, we take the first step toward healing. In doing so, we give ourselves the freedom to understand the depths of our emotions. It is in the quiet moments, when we sit with the hurt, that we can begin to unravel its true cause. Perhaps the pain is not entirely about the person who is ignoring us, but rather a deeper need for validation that we have not yet learned to fulfill within ourselves. Perhaps it is about the fear that we are not enough, that we are invisible in the eyes of those whose approval we seek. These are the hidden truths that can only come to light when we allow ourselves the space to feel. By acknowledging the pain of being ignored, we free ourselves from the shackles of denial. We stop pretending that the emotional wounds don't exist or that they are insignificant. We recognize that we are worthy of being seen, heard, and valued. And in that recognition, we begin to reclaim our power, not by seeking validation from others, but by validating our own emotions, our own experiences. We stop looking for permission to feel hurt, and we instead give ourselves the grace to simply be. Only then can we begin the process of understanding and growth that leads us to a place of resilience and self-love. Understanding the reflection that comes with being ignored is a pivotal step in the emotional journey we face. Often, when we are ignored, it feels personal, as though we are being cast aside without reason or explanation. The immediate instinct is to internalize the rejection, to ask, "What have I done wrong?" And, in doing so, we end up magnifying our own flaws and shortcomings. But this knee-jerk reaction, while natural, can be limiting and unproductive. It distorts the reality of the situation, preventing us from seeing the bigger picture. The truth is that being ignored is rarely, if ever, about us at all. Rather, it is often a reflection of the other person's circumstances, struggles, and limitations. It is essential to recognize this truth, as it can significantly shift the way we perceive such moments. When someone chooses to ignore you, it is not a direct commentary on your worth or value as a person. It is important to remember that we each have our own battles, our own internal conflicts, and our own ways of coping with the world. Perhaps the person who is ignoring you is dealing with something they have not yet found the strength to confront or share. Maybe they are struggling with emotions they can't articulate, and their silence is a way of retreating into themselves to protect what remains of their sense of self. It is in moments like these that it becomes clear. Their actions, their neglect, are more reflective of their personal state than of who you are. At times we forget that other people are not static beings. We assume they are always going to show up in the same way for us, ready to offer us attention, support, or validation. But human beings are complex and ever-changing. We all experience periods of emotional fatigue, confusion, or isolation that may prevent us from engaging with others in the way we normally would. When we are ignored, we are not necessarily being rejected or dismissed. We may simply be encountering another person in a moment of emotional distance or internal struggle. This is not a reflection of our inadequacy or worthlessness, but rather a sign that they are not capable, at that moment, of offering us the connection we seek. It's also important to consider that being ignored could be a manifestation of the other person's inability to engage with their own emotions. Sometimes, when people are faced with uncomfortable feelings, whether guilt, anger, or shame, they may distance themselves from the person they perceive as a trigger for those emotions. In these cases, the neglect is not because of any fault of our own, but because the other person is unable to process or confront their own feelings. They might withdraw because they don't know how to communicate or because they are caught in their own emotional turmoil. In this sense, their behavior speaks more about their own emotional struggles than about anything you have done. Another crucial aspect to recognize is that we are often not as central in other people's lives as we might imagine. We tend to internalize the idea that the way someone behaves toward us is indicative of their opinion of us. However, the truth is that people have their own lives, concerns, and distractions that may not always involve us. In moments of neglect, we must acknowledge that their silence or avoidance might not be a personal judgment, but rather a reflection of their own preoccupations. They may be dealing with personal issues or difficult life circumstances that have nothing to do with us. What appears to be neglect may simply be a consequence of their inability to balance their internal world with external connections. Understanding that being ignored is often more about the other person than it is about us allows us to release the weight of self-blame. It is liberating to realize that we are not responsible for how others choose to engage with us. We can control how we respond, but we cannot dictate the actions of others. Once we acknowledge that their behavior is not a reflection of our worth, we free ourselves from the cycle of questioning our value based on the behavior of others, and we also begin to let go of the tendency to seek validation from those who may not be capable or willing to provide it at that time. Instead, we learn to seek internal validation, trusting in our own value, rather than relying on external sources to define our worth. In this way, we can begin to build emotional resilience. When we understand that someone's actions are a reflection of their own struggles, it becomes easier to navigate moments of emotional neglect. We stop taking things personally, and instead, we create space for empathy and understanding. This shift in perspective allows us to approach situations of being ignored not as a reflection of our own inadequacies, but as a reminder of the complexities of human relationships and the emotional realities we all face. It helps us grow into individuals who can accept the ebb and flow of relationships without losing sight of our own intrinsic worth. Looking inward during moments when we feel ignored is perhaps one of the most transformative practices we can embrace. When someone's disregard cuts deep, it is easy to become consumed by the situation and the other person's actions. We instinctively search for reasons outside ourselves. Was it something we said? A behavior we displayed? A mistake we made? But in doing so, we often overlook a crucial opportunity for self-reflection. Instead of solely focusing on the external circumstances, we should turn our attention inward to better understand why being ignored affects us so profoundly. This inward look is not about blaming ourselves or overanalyzing our own faults. Rather, it's an opportunity to explore our emotional landscape, to get to the heart of why such moments leave us feeling so vulnerable. When we pause to reflect on the feelings that arise in the wake of being ignored, we often uncover deeper emotions that speak to our unmet needs. The pain of being ignored is not just about the immediate hurt of rejection. It often triggers a cascade of other emotions and insecurities. It may expose our fears of being unworthy or invisible, fears that we may not even be consciously aware of, until they are brought to the surface. It is important to acknowledge these feelings without judgment, allowing them to emerge and exist in their full complexity. Only through this process of self-exploration can we begin to understand the emotional underpinnings that make us so sensitive to being neglected. We may discover that we seek validation from others in order to feel secure in our self-worth. This need for external affirmation is a natural part of being human, but when it becomes the foundation of our sense of value, it can be a fragile structure. When someone ignores us, it rattles the very core of that structure, leaving us feeling lost and unsure. In these moments, it becomes clear that our self-worth has been tied to something outside ourselves, to someone else's actions or approval. This realization can be painful, but it is also empowering, for it is the first step in unshackling ourselves from the need for constant validation from others. Looking inward allows us to recognize that we are responsible for cultivating our own sense of worth. The emotional turbulence caused by being ignored serves as a signal that we have given our power away, allowing others to dictate how we feel about ourselves. When we become aware of this pattern, we can begin to shift our focus back to ourselves. We can start to practice self-questionization, learning to affirm our own value and significance independent of external influences. This shift is not immediate, nor is it always easy, but with time, it becomes a powerful tool for emotional autonomy and resilience. It's also crucial to recognize that being ignored can trigger a longing for connection and acceptance, both of which are fundamental human desires. But these desires, while valid, must be balanced by the recognition that connection starts from within. When we feel disconnected from others, it may reflect a deeper sense of disconnection within ourselves. Perhaps we have neglected our own emotional needs, failed to nurture our own self-compassion, or allowed our fears and insecurities to dictate how we engage with the world. In moments of neglect, we are often called to re-examine how we connect not only with others, but also with ourselves. Are we being kind to ourselves? Are we practicing self-compassion in the same way we would for a friend or loved one who is struggling? These are important questions to ask, for they reveal the depth of our own emotional relationship with ourselves. Looking inward also helps us identify any patterns or recurring themes in our relationships. If being ignored is a frequent experience, it may be worth examining whether we are choosing relationships that are inherently unbalanced or unhealthy. Are we allowing people into our lives who do not value or respect us? Are we consistently seeking approval from individuals who are not capable of providing it? By reflecting on these patterns, we can begin to make more conscious choices about the people we surround ourselves with. Looking inward allows us to cultivate a deeper sense of self-awareness, empowering us to make decisions that align with our values and needs. Finally, looking inward when we feel ignored gives us the space to practice self-forgiveness. It's easy to fall into the trap of blaming ourselves for the actions of others, wondering if we could have done something differently to prevent the neglect. But this line of thinking only perpetuates the cycle of self-doubt and insecurity. Instead, by looking inward, we allow ourselves the grace to recognize that we are human and that not every relationship or interaction will unfold according to our desires. We can forgive ourselves for any mistakes, missteps, or misunderstandings, and we can let go of any unnecessary guilt that we may be carrying. In doing so, we free ourselves from the weight of unnecessary self-criticism, making room for personal growth and emotional healing. Looking inward is not about assigning blame or digging into past wounds. It is about understanding why we react the way we do when we are ignored. It is about recognizing the deeper emotions that drive our responses and using those insights as a springboard for growth and self-compassion. Through this process, we can break free from the need for constant external validation and learn to cultivate a sense of inner peace and confidence that no one can take away. Reaffirming our self-worth in the face of being ignored is perhaps one of the most important steps in reclaiming our power and emotional strength. In a world that often places value on how others perceive us, it is easy to fall into the trap of letting the actions and opinions of others define our sense of self. When we are ignored, it can feel as if we have been cast aside, as if our existence has been invalidated by another person's disregard. In these moments, it is crucial to remember that our worth does not hinge on the attention, approval, or validation of others. Our intrinsic value lies in who we are, not in how others choose to engage with us. The first step in reaffirming our self-worth is recognizing that being ignored does not diminish our value. It's easy to internalize the message that if someone doesn't acknowledge us or pay attention to us, it must mean that we are unimportant or unworthy. However, this is a distortion of reality. People's behavior toward us is often influenced by their own circumstances, moods, and limitations. Their actions are not a reflection of our worth, but rather a reflection of their current state of being. When we are ignored, it is not a sign that we are less than anyone else. It is simply a moment in time where the other person is unable or unwilling to engage with us. It's important to challenge the assumption that someone's neglect is a personal indictment of who we are. Reaffirming our self-worth also involves breaking free from the cycle of seeking validation from others. It is only natural to want to be seen, to be acknowledged, and to be appreciated. These are human desires that connect us to the people around us. However, when we place our self-worth entirely in the hands of others, we become vulnerable to their opinions and behaviors. If someone ignores us, it can feel as though we have lost our sense of value, but true self-worth is cultivated from within. It comes from knowing and accepting ourselves, our strengths, our weaknesses, our quirks, and our imperfections. By learning to validate ourselves, we take back control of how we feel about who we are. We stop relying on external forces to tell us that we are worthy, and we begin to recognize our own inherent value. One of the most empowering ways to reaffirm our self-worth is through self-compassion. When we face the sting of being ignored, it can be easy to fall into the trap of self-criticism. We may question what we did wrong, blame ourselves for not being enough, or dwell on the mistakes we've made in the relationship. However, this line of thinking only perpetuates feelings of inadequacy and disempowerment. Instead, we can choose to respond to ourselves with kindness, understanding, and patience. Just as we would comfort a friend who was going through a difficult time, we can offer the same compassion to ourselves. This means recognizing that we are worthy of love and respect, regardless of the circumstances surrounding the situation. And so this is the deal. When we treat ourselves with compassion, we begin to build a foundation of self-worth that is not dependent on how others treat us, but rather on how we treat ourselves. Another important aspect of reaffirming our self-worth is setting boundaries. When we are ignored, it can be a sign that the boundaries in the relationship are not being respected. In these moments, it is essential to evaluate whether we are allowing others to treat us in ways that are disrespectful or hurtful. Reaffirming our self-worth means recognizing that we deserve to be treated with dignity and care. If someone continually ignores us or fails to engage with us in meaningful ways, it may be necessary to establish clearer boundaries to protect our emotional well-being. Setting boundaries is not about pushing people away, rather, it is about asserting our own needs and ensuring that we are treated in ways that honor our value as individuals. By establishing healthy boundaries, we are taking an active role in reaffirming our worth and creating an environment where we can thrive emotionally. Reaffirming our self-worth also requires a shift in perspective. It involves letting go of the need for constant approval from others and learning to embrace our own uniqueness. Often we look to others for reassurance, seeking their affirmation to feel confident and validated. However, this external dependence can leave us vulnerable to disappointment and rejection. Instead, we can cultivate a mindset of self-empowerment, where we draw strength from within. This does not mean we isolate ourselves or shut others out. Rather, it means we stop relying solely on others to tell us that we are worthy. We start to believe in our own worth, regardless of external circumstances. This shift in perspective also invites us to see the value in our own journey. Each experience we have, whether positive or negative, contributes to our growth and self-discovery. When we are ignored, it may be painful, but it also presents an opportunity to learn about ourselves. It challenges us to confront our insecurities and to develop a deeper understanding of who we are. In these moments, we are given the chance to reaffirm our worth by choosing how we respond to the situation. Do we allow the neglect of others to diminish our self-esteem, or do we rise above it, knowing that our worth is not tied to anyone's actions but our own perception of ourselves. Reaffirming our self-worth is an ongoing process, not a one-time event. It requires consistent effort, self-reflection, and self-love. However, the more we practice affirming our worth, the easier it becomes to recognize our value, even in the face of adversity. When we strengthen our sense of self-worth, we become less reliant on the behavior of others to dictate how we feel about ourselves. We realize that we are worthy, whole, and complete, regardless of how others choose to engage with us. By reaffirming our self-worth, we take back our power, embrace our authenticity, and become the best version of ourselves. One that is rooted in self-love and confidence, unshaken by the neglect of others. Learning to let go of the need for approval is a monumental step in breaking free from the emotional weight of being ignored. In a society that often rewards external validation, it is easy to become entangled in the belief that our worth is defined by how others perceive us. We are conditioned to seek approval, to crave acknowledgement, and to measure our success based on how much recognition we receive. The pain of being ignored often stems from the fear that we are not measuring up, that we are failing to meet the expectations of others. But true emotional liberation comes when we recognize that our value is not tied to anyone else's approval. We are worthy and enough simply by being who we are, independent of external judgment. Letting go of the need for approval requires a radical shift in mindset. It means reframing our understanding of self-worth. Instead of measuring our value by how others react to us or how much they affirm us, we begin to recognize our intrinsic worth as human beings. This shift is not easy, especially when we have spent much of our lives seeking approval from others. We live in a world where social media likes, professional accolades, and personal compliments are often seen as the ultimate indicators of success. Yet this external reinforcement can only provide temporary satisfaction, and it leaves us vulnerable to the harsh sting of neglect when the validation is not forthcoming. The first step in letting go of this need is recognizing that we are enough just as we are. We do not have to prove our worthiness to anyone. The people who choose to ignore us may have their own reasons. Perhaps they are distracted by their own issues or simply do not have the capacity to engage with us in the way we need. But their inability to acknowledge us does not make us any less valuable. It does not change the truth that we are deserving of love, respect, and consideration. When we internalize this truth, we begin to free ourselves from the shackles of external validation. Letting go of the need for approval also involves confronting the underlying fears that drive our desire for acknowledgement. Often, the fear of being ignored is tied to a deeper fear of rejection, of being unloved or unimportant. These fears stem from our desire to belong, to be seen, and to feel connected. While these are natural human desires, they can become unhealthy when we allow them to dictate our self-worth. The fear of rejection often drives us to seek constant affirmation from others, even at the cost of our own emotional well-being. But when we realize that we are inherently worthy of love and connection, regardless of whether or not others affirm us, we can begin to dissolve the power these fears hold over us. Another important aspect of letting go of the need for approval is learning to trust ourselves. We have an inner compass, a sense of what is right and true for us. Often, we ignore this inner voice in favor of seeking outside validation. But when we start to trust our own judgment, when we listen to our own instincts, we begin to understand that we do not need others to tell us that we are on the right path. We can stand confidently in our choices, knowing that they are in alignment with our values and beliefs. By trusting ourselves, we reclaim our autonomy and break free from the cycle of seeking approval from external sources. This process of letting go also invites us to focus on the things that truly matter. When we seek approval from others, we often lose sight of our own goals, desires, and passions. We may mold ourselves into someone we think others will accept, sacrificing our authenticity in the process. But when we let go of the need for approval, we are free to pursue what truly brings us joy and fulfillment. We no longer measure our success by how others perceive our achievements, but by how deeply we are connected to our own sense of purpose. Letting go of approval opens up space for us to cultivate our own passions and live in a way that is true to ourselves, not based on how we are seen by others. The process of releasing the need for approval also requires us to accept that not everyone will like us or approve of us. This is a hard truth to face, especially for those of us who are people pleasers or who have an intense desire for social acceptance. It can feel uncomfortable to realize that we cannot control how others perceive us, nor should we. Not everyone will understand us, and not everyone will offer us the validation we seek. But when we accept this fact, we take away the power that the fear of disapproval holds over us. We learn that we do not need everyone's approval to feel whole or valuable. Our worth is not determined by the opinions of others, but by our own understanding of who we are and what we stand for. Finally, letting go of the need for approval helps us build a deeper sense of inner peace. We stop living for the approval of others and begin living for ourselves. We cultivate self-love and self-acceptance, understanding that we are enough just as we are. This inner peace allows us to approach life with greater confidence, knowing that we do not need to constantly seek external validation to feel good about ourselves. We are no longer at the mercy of others' opinions, and we can engage with the world from a place of authentic self-assurance. Letting go of the need for approval is a journey, not a destination. It is a process that requires patience, self-reflection, and commitment. But as we move through this process, we find that we are not only liberated from the emotional pain of being ignored, but we also experience a profound sense of freedom. We no longer need to prove ourselves to anyone. We can simply be, and in that being, we discover our true worth. Embracing the silence when someone ignores us can feel like an overwhelming challenge, but it is in many ways an invitation to grow, reflect, and reclaim our peace. The discomfort of silence can be deafening. It may evoke feelings of rejection, loneliness, or confusion. Our minds may race with questions like, why aren't they responding? What did I do wrong? We may feel abandoned, as though our worth is being questioned simply because we are not receiving the attention or acknowledgement we crave. However, if we allow ourselves to sit with the discomfort of silence, we begin to uncover its hidden lessons. This silence is not merely a void to be filled, but an opportunity to transform our emotional landscape and redefine our relationship with ourselves. Silence can be unsettling, especially in a world that thrives on constant communication and connection. We live in a time when we are often expected to be available, responsive, and engaged at all times. The idea of being ignored or left in silence challenges this constant connectivity. Yet within this silence, there is a profound space for introspection and self-discovery. It offers us the chance to step away from the noise of external influences and truly listen to our own thoughts, feelings, and needs. Instead of being consumed by the need for others to engage with us, we are given the opportunity to reconnect with ourselves and reflect on our own inner world. When we are ignored, it can feel like we have been left in a place of isolation, but in truth, this isolation is a gift. It forces us to confront the reality that our self-worth is not contingent upon the actions of others. We are not defined by how much attention we receive, or how many people validate our existence. This silence asks us to look inward and reconnect with our sense of self, independent of external circumstances. It challenges us to remember that we are whole on our own and that our value comes from within. Embracing silence also allows us to practice emotional resilience. Life is filled with moments of uncertainty, disconnection, and disappointment. Not every conversation, relationship, or interaction will go the way we expect or hope. But in these moments of silence and neglect, we have the opportunity to build our emotional strength. We learn that we can endure discomfort without losing our sense of self. What? We become less dependent on the approval and validation of others and more grounded in our own sense of inner peace. Silence teaches us that we can sit with our emotions, whether they are feelings of sadness, frustration, or confusion, without being overwhelmed by them. We can hold space for ourselves, allowing our feelings to arise, process, and eventually pass without defining us. In addition to emotional resilience, embracing silence cultivates a deeper sense of patience and acceptance. When we are ignored, we often want to fill the silence with answers, explanations, or reassurances. We may feel the urge to reach out, to demand a response, or to force an explanation. However, sometimes the best thing we can do in these moments is simply to sit with the silence, to let things unfold naturally, without rushing or forcing. By accepting the silence, we acknowledge that not everything requires immediate resolution. We learn to trust that things will evolve in their own time, and that we do not need to control the outcome. This patience fosters a sense of calm, allowing us to approach the situation with a clear mind rather than reacting impulsively out of anxiety or fear. The silence also provides space for clarity. In the absence of external noise and distraction, we are given the opportunity to reflect on what truly matters to us. When we are ignored, it often forces us to question the nature of our relationships and what we are seeking from them. Are we looking for validation, connection, or understanding? What do we need from others, and why do we feel the way we do when it is not forthcoming? By embracing the silence, we can ask ourselves these important questions and gain clarity about our emotional needs and desires. We may discover that the need for validation we feel is not rooted in the other person's actions, but in our own fears and insecurities. This clarity empowers us to make decisions that align with our authentic self, rather than reacting to the behavior of others. Moreover, silence invites us to cultivate gratitude for the relationships and connections we do have. When we are ignored, it can feel as though we are being shut out of the world. But by embracing silence, we are reminded of the importance of those who do engage with us, those who show up and offer their attention and care. In these moments of neglect, we can take a step back and appreciate the people who value us, who respond when we reach out, and who make an effort to connect. This shift in perspective allows us to let go of the frustration and hurt caused by being ignored, and instead focus on nurturing the relationships that are healthy and meaningful. Silence, in this way, can bring about a deeper sense of appreciation for the bonds we share with others. Another profound aspect of embracing silence is the opportunity it provides for personal growth. When we are constantly seeking the attention or approval of others, we can become distracted from our own goals, desires, and aspirations. The noise of external validation can drown out our inner voice, making it difficult to hear what we truly want for ourselves. Silence, however, allows us to reconnect with our own dreams and ambitions. It gives us the space to focus on our own growth, to reflect on what we want to achieve, and to begin working towards our goals without the need for constant external reassurance. In the absence of others' opinions, we are free to listen to our own heart and chart our own course. Embracing silence is not about passively accepting neglect or allowing others to treat us poorly. Rather, it is about recognizing the opportunities that silence offers for self reflection, emotional resilience, and personal growth. It is about using the space created by silence to reconnect with ourselves, to understand our own emotions and needs, and to cultivate a deeper sense of self worth. Silence teaches us that we are enough, that we do not need the constant approval of others to feel whole. By embracing silence, we unlock the power to heal, to grow, and to move forward with a renewed sense of purpose and inner strength. In conclusion, while being ignored can certainly hurt, it is not a reflection of our value, but rather a sign that we need to look inward. It is an opportunity to reaffirm our self-worth, to release the need for external validation, and to embrace the silence as a space for growth. In moments of neglect, we are reminded that our value is not contingent upon the approval or acknowledgement of others. By learning to navigate the pain of being ignored with patience, self-compassion, and a shift in perspective, we reclaim our power and emotional resilience. We learn that we are enough just as we are, and that silence is not an empty void but a fertile ground for introspection and personal growth. As we let go of the need for approval, we free ourselves from the emotional chains that hold us back, enabling us to move forward with confidence and peace. Ultimately, being ignored is not a sign of inadequacy, but a call to honor ourselves. Trust our own worth and stand firm in the truth that we are deserving of love, and respect, whether or not others recognize it.